Adoption and expensive, two words that do not always belong together. There are 120,000 children in the United States that are waiting for a forever family, and adopting through this option is extremely affordable. I'm Marcy Bursack, an adoptive mom of a sibling pair, and also the author of The Forgotten Adoption Option. Twice monthly, I will interview people like adoptive parents and adopted children who have been touched by foster care adoption. My goal is to find more forever families and increase awareness about foster care adoption, because if it were you or me, we would want someone to do this for us. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. Today, I'm going to interview a couple who are adoptive parents. Together, they adopted 5 boys who were all over the age of 6 when they met. Hi, Robin and Dave.
Hello.
Robin and Dave started One Heart Family Ministries, which is an organization in St. Louis that my husband and I went through to obtain our license to adopt through the foster care system. As my daughter said as I left tonight to record this episode, we wouldn't be a family without Robin and Dave. During training, Robin came as a guest to share about her family's story, and it was so touching that I invited Robin and Dave to share their own family story with my listeners. So Robin, let's kick this off. How exactly did you get involved in the foster care system?
Well, back and my children were in school at Central Christian School, and there was a family who had children there with who were friends of my kids, and I always saw this mom that had different little babies off and on. And so finally I went up to Jan Nienhuis and said, well, how are you getting all these kids? And she said, well, I'm a foster parent. And I said, a foster parent? What's a foster parent? And it was the first time back in 1989 that I heard anything about foster care. And when I heard that, a light went off in my heart, and I knew right then and there that this is where God wanted to use me and my family. So I told my husband about it, and he was like, well, we have 4 children already. I don't think I'm in for doing foster care. And so I said, but I really think this is God calling me and us to do this. And so it took a year of prayer and talking to Dave until finally he ended up in 1990 saying, okay, if this is what you feel the Lord's leading us and our family to do, let's do it. So in 1990, we became foster parents.
So if people are doing the math, they heard me introduce you as a couple that adopted 5 boys, and you just said you had 4 biological children. So if we all do the math, 5 plus 4 is 9. So some people might be listening thinking, what is going on here? Yeah, you guys have 9 children. So why don't you tell me about that, you or Dave? How many children in total? You said 5 through the foster care system. Can you tell us a little about how each one joined your family?
Well, be honest with you, when we were going into foster care, I had no intentions of adopting as the man. And then as the Lord led us, I found out about termination of parental rights and how kids get bounced around and permanency in their lives makes such a difference. So we committed that if they came into our house, that they would either go back with their parents, and if they'd lost their parents and were terminated, we would adopt them. And I always tell people, take a step of faith at a time, because then the first one happened, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth, and the fifth. But it happened gradually, and we wanted to be in God's will, and we always prayed about it when the situation came up. And we went from being only foster parents to adopting 5 boys.
And so what was the first, so you're a family of 4 kids and 2 parents, your family of 6, and you become foster parents. What was that initial, having an extension to your family like? Because you already kind of had your family unit. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a good story. Robin mentioned our very first placement, Chris and Jamie. And we had 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys, of course, were hoping for a boy. Girls were hoping for a girl. And we're praying, of course, for the kids that were coming to us. And it almost sounds like it's not real. God sent us twins, a boy and a girl. And it was very exciting. The first placement is very exciting. When we get the call, I remember Robin called me at work, and my office was right down from DFS, which is now called the Children's Division, I guess, on Page. Avenue. And that's how fast it happened. She goes, there's twins, you need to go pick them up. So I went down there, and there's Chris and Jamie there, and it's very exciting.
So your first placement, it sounds like you fostered them.
Yes.
Because I remember you saying you adopted a girl. And just for our listeners,
we adopted a boy, Chris.
You adopted the boy of the twins.
Right. Robin had mentioned that Jamie went back with her mom's sister. Their mom died of a drug overdose while we had him, and Jamie and Chris went to live with their aunt temporarily, but Chris was unmanageable for her because she was a young single mom and had her own children. And then Chris came back into our home, and we adopted him.
So you ended up keeping one of the first kids in
One
your
of
home.
the very first placement. We
Which is
adopted our
wild.
very first placement.
Which is wild.
Yep.
Which is wild. And for those listening that might not be as familiar with foster care, so placement is essentially a child or a group of children that are placed in your home. They call it a placement as a result of that. So over the years, your niche has really become older boys, and older being over the age of 6. And that's a really rare quality for an adoptive home. Most times that people want to go into this, they think, oh, I want a baby, or they don't always think I want a boy who's a little, maybe not a baby. So there might be a listener asking themselves if they could ever do what you've done. Could they ever help an older child? How did you each know that you were able to be successful with boys, and why didn't you want girls?
Well, we didn't care what sex we had. We were open for either. But once we started having boys, it just seemed like they kept calling us for boys. And once we had so many boys, my biological daughters were the oldest, and I had my 2 youngest biological were boys. So my girls went off to college, and I had nothing but boys in the house, so I didn't feel it would be right to mix at that time, because we did want older children versus the younger. I guess they consider birth to 4 or 5. We wanted school-age kids, and so the Lord had a plan. It wasn't really us. It's just how things happened. And I knew a lot of times people don't want boys, or they're afraid of older boys that they would not be able to handle. And I knew that God had equipped me to be able to do that. And I really adopted boys, or took in boys that were very troubled boys. We were never afraid. I was never afraid, because I knew the Lord was leading. We prayed for every child that came in our home, and I knew God sent them. So I knew he would equip me to be able to deal with any situation. And he did. He didn't fail us.
A lot of trust there. So a couple things you said were that you didn't want to mix your kids. Can you say more about that for people that might be thinking, oh, I might want to do this, but what kind of guidance is Robin giving me?
Well, we had boys, and they were becoming teenagers, and I did have a placement of a sibling group of 2, a boy and a girl, and the girl was 13, and I think her brother was 11, and I had a couple teenage boys at the time and younger, and it was a lot of hormones. And at night, I didn't sleep real well, not knowing who was going maybe into the girls' room or not, or having her to worry about that. So without having that mix of, to me, is having boys that had had issues in the past and mixing them with girls too. So this way I didn't want to have to worry about any type of sexual behavior or things going on that I might be out of my control. Yeah. So we just stuck with boys after that.
So by separating them, you're able to really help with boundaries and to help anyone and everyone involved, just not really have to worry about that extra.
Right. So we took girls in the beginning. I mean, when they were younger, it didn't matter. But when they started reaching into the teen years, then we had to be a little bit more cautious, and we just stuck with the Lord sending us the boys.
You really kind of fell into your niche. Dave, it sounded like you had something to add there.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like Robin said earlier, our 2 biological girls were the oldest. And in fact, our biological son's 3 years younger than our second daughter. And so after 2 girls, we had 7 boys. So we are the boy people. And Robin is uniquely tough enough to handle these boys. And so together that's our thing, I guess.
You're quite a pair. Do you guys remember what you signed up to do? Because I know sometimes, like my husband and I, we signed up to do kids ages 4 through 10, 1 to 2 of them, and we ended up with a totally different age group. Like ours were younger. We didn't even expect that. And I know sometimes people are like, well, I really wanted this. And that's not always what happens.
Yeah, initially, we were fans of the birth order, keeping them younger than our youngest. But when the twins came about, Chris is actually a little older than our youngest. But so we kind of broke our very first kids.
Was your youngest and Chris in the same grade, or was Chris a year older?
My oldest son and Chris were in the same grade.
Okay.
Paul, our youngest, was a little younger, but
by age, but they were in the same grade level.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what you signed up for?
Yeah, we signed up for 6 and older. Boy or girl, we weren't. Sibling groups we were willing to take, whatever. But we were strictly, in mine, I had no intention of adoption. Ours was strictly, I wanted to reach as many people and many kids and help as many and share Jesus with as many kids and their families I could. So I wanted a revolving door. I mean, I wanted them to get reunited with their family and then get some more, another group come in where I could just keep sharing Jesus with them. But God had a different plan, and when they sent them, there's no way I could have said, "Oh, we prayed for you and God sent you to us, but well, we don't want to adopt you." There was no way we could do that. And it just happened. The Lord just kept sending us more and more. And when we reached 9 kids, my husband said, "Well, maybe we ought to think about this. And what else? How's another way we could, reach and help more kids?" And so we thought maybe we'd start an orphanage and different things like that. And it ended up coming. My husband said, "Well, why don't we? The system's already there. Why don't we use it, but go into churches and recruit Christian families to come along, and we train them and get them licensed and take in children and be able to share Jesus." So, with us only being able to reach 9 kids, with the ministry that I've had for 16 years now, we've been able to reach probably over 1,000 kids who've been able to hear the gospel message being placed in our homes, being able to go back, or either that or being adopted. So God knew, again, what he was doing when he did, had us go from being foster parents to starting a ministry that we would recruit other families.
Which is amazing when you think about that, because we kind of show this in common where you were done at 9, and in a way this ministry became your 10th child, right? And then God multiplied that. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I had the same sort of moment where I was all about, let's get a bus, like let's adopt 12 little girls in 2 straight lines. Like I was all about, let's have a big family. And my husband came from a small family, so for him 2 was the max, and me saying let's do siblings was my way to say, well, fine, I'll get them together. And it's interesting because the reason why I wrote my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, was I knew from talking to my husband that we felt like the 4 of us was the family size for us, that the 2 children and the 2 parents. And so I've kind of been jokingly calling my book my 3rd child, because it's I want to help more children, but I can't raise them. Like that's some ways like beyond our capacity. So I love that that's kind of segueing you into having this ministry opportunity. So you started a nonprofit called One Heart Family Ministry. So if you're in the St. Louis region, check them out. And this is really interesting. So taking the Muppets Christmas Carol view, one could argue that there are already plenty of nonprofits. There's a scene in the Muppets Christmas Carol where a couple people from a charity come in and they ask Scrooge for some money, and they're like, "Scrooge, can you give some money?" And he makes these really snide comments about how, like, if I give you money, then are you going to get rid of the need? And they're like, "Well, no, there's going to be a need." And he's like, "Well, then I don't need to give you money because you can't get rid of it," kind of thing. And so what's interesting, though, to your point, is One Heart is a very special nonprofit that I wish were more across our country. So can you talk about why you started One Heart Family Ministries and what's special about it?
Well, it's the only organization in St. Louis that's run with a Christian perspective. And I knew to be able to really give these kids unconditional love, and that you had to first know what forgiveness was on your own self. Being adopted into God's family gave me a taste of what adoption here on earth is that God loves us and he engrafted us into his family. And I feel that's what we did with that. And so starting One Heart, I thought, well, I didn't know anything about foster care until the Jan Nienhuis shared her story with me about being a foster parent. And I thought if I could go into churches and share my story and what God had done with me, that if other people heard it in the church, that they would come along and want to do the same thing. And so with that passion, we started One Heart, and we would go into church and recruit from Bible study, women Bible studies, and started getting, and then after years went by, our family started recruiting for us, because they said, hey, if you want to adopt, you really need to go, because we really put a great emphasis on our training through the Bible and through biblical perspective, which, God, we called it a ministry in our family. I mean, we talked with my biological children before we ever thought about doing it, and said we felt God was calling our whole family as a ministry to do, and they were all on it. They were all, yes, let's help them, let's share Jesus, let's take care of them and love them and that. So we were all in agreement, was a whole, and when each child, our whole family prayed together for that child. So it was always a group as a thing. And then after we had foster kids and we started adopting them, then they came in, and then we all were praying, and they were praying for more foster kids and more, oh yeah, we got to adopt them. And so it was just such a beautiful picture of God's redeeming grace and love and unconditional love and forgiveness. So it was just I don't regret one day. I mean, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of tough days, but man, we grew so much spiritually as a couple, as individuals, and as a family, and I would do it all over again. And my children feel the same. A big concern is, well, how did your biological kids feel? And now that they're grown, 2 of my kids went through my One Heart classes and became foster parents, and 2 of my other siblings married people who had adopted siblings. So it's just amazing how God did it, and they all want to become foster parents at some point or adopt at some point in their lives. So it was a great thing. They always thanked us for having a family, and all their friends. It was a great testimony to all their friends when they'd come over and see, and they would do help and take care of the foster kids and be kind to them. So it was really a great witness of God's love.
Which is so amazing, because if you think about it, and I've heard this from people who've said, Marcy, I've always wanted to share my story, or I never knew how, and there could be more Robins in the world that could impact thousands of kids and families, and there can also be other people in the world that just maybe haven't told their story. I was talking to a friend of mine this past weekend. She just went and picked up her daughter that she was adopting. She called me the night before, and we had met, and I explained everything to her, and she said, I just wanted to tell you I'm picking up my daughter tomorrow. I'm driving to Columbia. And what I loved about our conversation is she said, I just told this friend of mine what I was doing, and I started talking to her about how I was adopting, and she said, I can't believe you're just talking to me about adoption. Like, you're telling me your family's story. She said, I actually adopted my child, and I could never do that. And she said, that makes me feel so, so, so uncomfortable. And my friend said what she thought was amazing in that moment was that she kind of planted a little seed that it's okay to talk about adoption, and that by doing so, by letting people see your family and letting them know these are kids, we're a family, we might look a little bit different from each other or not, who knows, but like by talking about our adoption journeys, we can spark ideas, and we can potentially help another child or 2 or however many. And so I just want to let our listeners hear that piece, that if you've adopted a child or children and maybe you didn't know where to share it or who to share it with, but just talking about it with a friend or a family member or commenting on a post or something, it just has such a big impact, because you never know what little seeds you're planting. So Dave and Robin, you guys have a large family. I mean, it's pretty apparent when you multiply how that all works out. And some people might be turned off from pursuing foster care adoption because they don't want to have a huge family. Mm-hmm. What would you say to listeners that have a fear kind of size, of family size?
Well, like you said before, I mean, we have a large family, but if somebody would adopt one, if they're comfortable with one, as God leads them, that's great. If it's 2, that's great. Everybody's different. God made everybody different, and capabilities are different. And like I said, we take one step of faith at a time, and that's where we were, and I was able to do it at that time, but not everybody is. fact, there used to be a ministry called One Church, One Child. And they say if every church would take in one of the kids, we would be okay. But you have to talk to a lot of people to get somebody to take somebody into their home.
Yeah.
So I would not fear when they hear our story that not everybody's going to do that, and they wouldn't be expected to.
So maybe another fear that's coming up on the same topic is, how do I say no, right? You guys kind of had a stopping point. So do you have any advice on kind of knowing your limit of I don't want to take care of more than a child or 3 children, and being able to kind of put the brakes on?
We did not have a limit in the beginning. I think in God's timing, as we got older and situation changed, it was apparent at that time that, okay, there used to be a TV show called 8 is Enough, and I used to think about that. Actually, before I got into foster care, we had 4 children, and I had a license plate that 4SENUF, 4 is enough. And then we ended up adopting 5, and then there was a TV, 8 is enough.
And then you had to get 9. A new license plate.
And then I had to get rid of 4 is enough, and
you didn't get the plates?
9 was the number.
Did you get new plates?
No, well, the 4 is enough I didn't have 8 is enough. That was a TV show from the old days.
Could have changed it.
But 4 is enough was our license plate on a van I had after we had our 4th child. And who would have thought? Who would have thought?
That's so funny. Dave, I want to ask you from earlier, because one thing that I hear often, right, is there's one spouse that's kind of ready, and it sounded like Robin was, and then Robin had to wait, and I was very similar. I was ready, and my husband wasn't. And so can you talk through what you remember going through your heart and your head during that time where you were like, not yet? Like, how did you process through that?
Well, ours is from a spiritual journey. Our brief testimony. Robin and I were married in 1977, both lost as could be, not Christians. In fact, Robin worked in an abortion clinic. That's how lost we were.
Which is the complete opposite of what you ended up doing.
Exactly. So then in 1982, I'll give you the short version. People came in our lives, actually old friends from grade school that got saved, and Robin got involved in a Bible study, and Robin was radically saved in 1982. I mean, everybody's going to hell, witnessing to everybody. And then I was in these Bible studies too. To make a long story short again, I kind of faked it for a few years. And then, as I don't remember what exact year Janine and I showed Robin foster care, but it was late 80s and she was interested in it. And I was still lost. Finally, in 1989, December of 89, I surrendered my life to the Lord, was truly born again, a new creation. And then I was just trying to seek God's will. It was maybe out of fear that God would discipline if I didn't do it, versus what it should be is out of love. But at that point, that's when I went to Robin and said, all right, Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for by grace you're saved through faith, not of yourself, it's a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Ephesians 2:10 says, we were created unto good works that God prepared in advance for us to do. So as Christians, God's got a calling, and foster care and ministry is a calling. And clearly, he called us into that. And then we answered that call then, and I acquiesced. And, the first one was a little scary, the twins. And then 2 was okay. 3 then got a little more scary, and then it went on and on. But it was one step of faith at a time is really what it was. And at that point, we were just trying to do what God led us to do. That's it. And then I think God knows at that time, after 9, I don't even remember what year that was, clearly, it was around 2004 when One Heart started.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's
we
so interesting.
We were, I guess, getting too old. I guess so. If you can't do, teach.
I don't know. In my book, I talk about feeling too old as the parent. How that's really a lie, because there's not really a stopping age. But it just when you're feeling like maybe your role is shifting.
Right. Yeah. Oh no, we're still a parent. Like I said, we've got 16 grandkids, and we're always parenting. So.
That's so interesting. Well, and in the story you share about yourself of feeling like you wish maybe you would have been compelled more, but you felt more like you were running away from what you were being called to do. And it's stories in the Bible, right? Like Noah is supposed to go talk to, not Noah. Who goes into the whale? Jonah. Thank you. Jonah's supposed to go and tell this people group.
To Nineveh.
Yes, to Nineveh, and tell them. And he's like, no. And he runs away. And so it's sort of that warning of God's like, no, like you need to go do what I've asked you to do.
But that's not uncommon, like you said. With Robin, she's very passionate Italian, and I'm a stoic German. So God puts opposites together, and together you're stronger, right?
Exactly.
We embrace our differences and our strengths to come together. And so she has the passion, and I'm more of the stoic. She gets a passion, then I have to do it.
So
She wants to do a ministry, and then I have to figure out how to get it done. Just
and then it
you
works
don't have to
well.
put that on. No.
It works well together, though.
Oh, yeah.
So foster care adoption, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is an adoption option that's in the United States. Most people don't even know that it's a thing. They think that foster care is a thing, and they think adoption's a thing, but the three words together, foster care adoption, a lot of people have no idea that that's even like a thing. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because it's unawareness. People aren't aware that you can adopt through the state like that and have children right here in your own state. A lot of people think you adopt privately or out of the country, or an infant. And to me, I loved and had the calling that I wanted to be able to share the Lord and love and be able to communicate with the older kids. And I had so many kids at the time, and we were so active in sports and school that I thought if I had babies, it'd be too much work and I'd be too busy with all my other kids. So I think it's just that they're not aware of the need of so many older kids that need to be adopted, or they're so afraid, out of fear, I don't want to deal, they're going to have all these issues. Well, they have issues just because they're hurt and rejected and all that they've been through. But it's amazing to see when you give them unconditional love and you share and give them hope for a future. There's nothing to be scared of. They're just like you and me, and if I always put myself in their shoes, if it were me, what would I want somebody to do? And it isn't, to think I'm an outcast or I'm terrible or scared or I have no redeeming grace about me. It's not any of the kids' fault that they're in care. They did nothing, and it's their parents in the situation they came out of. So, for me, I just think that's why One Heart, I talk as much as I can, whenever I can, about foster care and adoption, just to make an awareness out there, because until somebody shares it, just like with the gospel, until people really share it, people don't really know. So I appreciate your blogs, and I'm so glad, that we got to know each other through One Heart, that we're able. I think this is all part of God's plan, and that's what he does, and these kids need to have that future, and you need to not be afraid. It's fear comes from Satan, and when you have the Lord on your side, he's in control, and he doesn't ever give us any more than what we can handle. If we're on our knees in prayer for that, God he directed us with all of our kids, our bio and our adopted and all foster. So, we just trusted him. We stayed in prayer, and we did it it made us a much stronger couple, because we prayed always, every day, for all the kids and, for our marriage. And it just said, God, it's just amazing to see what he did when you're obedient, and how much he changes you. It's me who needed to be changed, not really the kids. They just needed to be loved. So,
which is parenting, right?
Exactly.
Often, regardless if you're parenting a biological child or an adopted child.
No difference. That's it. They're all they needed. You don't have to teach a child to be bad. You got to teach them to be good, whether you're biological or not, and they just need to have a good example. And so to be able to show them how a family's supposed to operate, and how a dad and a mom love each other and love their kids, a lot of them never had ever seen that. So what a great opportunity to think God would take me, especially that I did work in an abortion clinic, but that's the whole redeeming thing of my story, is that God not only forgave me and did it, but he took that passion and that guilt that I had from knowing that I had helped murder all these babies, and took it and reversed it and used me, a sinner, the greatest of sinners, to use me as his hands to love kids who are hurting in that. And I just thought, what a privilege that God allowed me to be his hands to serve these kids and to love them, because none of them are mine. Biological, are adopted, are foster, they're all his, and he allowed me to take care of them. I don't feel any different than Mary and Joseph. I mean, God chose them to be Jesus's mother. His parents. And so it's just, to me, I felt that same way, that God's called me to be all my kids, my son's mom. And so they're his. None of them are mine, and we never treated any of them any different. No one would ever know who are my adopted and who are my biologicals. We treated them all as God's children. And he just calls his church to come alongside and to help his kids, not our kids or anybody. So it's just, I mean, to me, what a privilege.
Absolutely. What a privilege to be able to have that role. I want to close with a question I actually had a listener ask about large families, and I think you guys are the perfect people to answer. How do you help each child, because you had a blend of adopted and biological children. How do you help each child feel special as the family size expands?
Well, again, with the Lord, but what we did is we'd always take one child out each by themselves. So we'd be able to ask them, how things were going, if they had any issues, and give them undivided attention of just Dave and I, just them by themselves. So we did that with all of them, foster, adopted, biological, so that they felt special, that they did it. But we just spread the time where my 4 biological already were sharing. But there are 4 of them already, so they already knew how to share and how to take, and so we kind of slowly learned that process from having 4 biological, and my children didn't think anything of it. So then when we did the same thing with the adopted and foster kids, take them out, how's everything going? Is anybody picking on you? Is there a thing as house school? We gave them that undivided attention, so we would do that and make sure that we had one-on-one time with all of them, and Dave spent.
Yeah, no, I spend time with them, but there's a different dynamic. When you have that many people, you can't, if you have one child, you can't give them as much attention, but there's advantages of a big group too, especially when you adopt foster kids. Because JD and Michael, 2 of our adopted sons, they are so close. One went to the Army, one went into the Navy, and just having this big sibling group, and we do things together, we would go to the lake together and do things together. And we did, like Robin said, do one-on-one with them. Right now, every one of our grandkids, we take by themselves out on their birthday, take them to dinner, and get them something to eat. And then we would do the same thing with our kids individually. But you can't kid anybody. I mean, when you have 9 kids, you're not going to be as much attention as 2. But there's advantages to that big group, too. And we wouldn't know any different now when we all come together and the boys, bonded together. And so there's advantages and disadvantages to everything, right? Absolutely.
And it's so fun to peek in. And so I think everyone that was listening and has listened and people that will pick this up later are just going to be so encouraged to see inside. I think it's interesting to see inside a large family, to hear your story of working in an abortion clinic and then helping thousands of families, and how you both kind of came together as a couple to walk this journey out together. And so it's so fun. This is one of the only podcasts, aside from my husband, that I've actually done in person. So it's been so fun to be able to sit beside you and record this. As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 120,000 children who are waiting for a forever family. You can also help raise awareness by leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, talking about, and liking this podcast. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling set through the foster care system, visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find out how to get started, and you can even order a copy of my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which will guide you through the entire process, and it is available in paperback, audio, and ebook. I welcome you to reach out with questions, comments, and your own story. I would love to hear if you're signing up for training or where you are in the adoption process. You can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for Marcy Bursack. Thank you for tuning in, caring, and sharing, because every child deserves a family.